In 1862, French Emperor Napoleon III invaded Mexico, allegedly to collect debt owed by the Mexican government, but in reality, his goal was to instate Maximilian II as his puppet monarch of Mexico. One of the leading generals of the French forces was Charles de Lorenzo, a 48-year-old veteran general who had a track record of successful service in Algeria and against the Russians in the Crimean War, where he earned his rank at the Battle of Malakoff. His army had plowed into Mexico facing little resistance, delivering humiliating defeats for Mexico, until the French advanced to the city of Puebla, where the young Mexican general, by the name of Ignacio Zaragoza, decided that enough was enough. Despite being only 33 years of age, Ignacio Zaragoza was no stranger to battle. He had previously commanded for the Liberal Army during the Mexican Reform War, and played a major role in the victory at the Battle of Calpulalpan just 2 years earlier. Both generals had achievement under their belts, but de Lorenzo would bring the upper hand. His army outnumbered Zaragoza by up to 3 times as many men, and on top of that, he was French. The French army was considered to be among the best in the world. It had a fierce reputation left over from the Napoleonic era, with professionalism and cutting-edge technology for the time. The Mexican army, on the other hand, was considered to be a ragtag force, with the bare minimum of training and equipment, with a bad reputation from losing the Mexican-American War. However, Zaragoza was about to prove otherwise. It was a hot summer day on the 5th of May in the desert city of Puebla. De Lorenzo saw that he had the mass numerical advantage, and sought to drive the Mexicans from the field while risking as little troops as possible. His plan was to attack the lightly defended Fort Guadalupe with a portion of his infantry, with artillery support from his grand battery of cannons. From there, the French could use the cannons in the fortress to fire down upon the rest of the Mexican army, which would leave Zaragoza with no choice but to retreat if he wished to keep his army intact. The first attack began at noon, starting with a heavy cannonade from French artillery. Little did the French notice, however, most of their shells were bouncing off the hillside, thus causing only superficial damage. The French infantry had to advance through rough terrain, covered in rocks and agave. Their ranks were being torn apart by Mexican artillery fire from both forts at close range. Their attack on Fort Guadalupe was easily repulsed by determined Mexicans, who inflicted heavy casualties. De Lorenzo failed to deliver the decisive blow he planned for, costing him time and men. He needed a new plan to win fast. In his second attempt, Lorenzo decided to launch an assault on the Mexican right flank, in order to pin them down as a diversion. While the diversion was in place, the infantry on the French left led an attack on the fortress once more. This attack was more successful. The French managed to raise their flag over the fortress amidst heavy fighting, but the Mexican colors were still flying after the French were driven out again at bayonet point. Meanwhile, on the right, the Mexican lines held with strength and courage, and pushed back the French as well. Soon the French forces were recalled in failure, but Zaragoza's men were only holding on by a thread. He issued one final all-out attack, including all of his reserve forces. This was to be the nail in the coffin for Zaragoza's army. It was discovered at this time that the French cannons had run completely out of ammunition, and so the final French wave was sent in without any artillery support. The desperate attack on Guadalupe was met with an even more desperate Mexican defense, who clung on to their lives in grim hand-to-hand combat. Meanwhile on the right, the French and Mexican soldiers exchanged volleys until the entire attacking force began to fall back in disarray. Zaragoza then saw the weakness in the French forces. They were exhausted and shaken after enduring multiple failed attacks with heavy losses. Zaragoza was not going to waste this opportunity to take the initiative. He issued an all-out Mexican attack. A ferocious line battle developed on the Mexican right flank. On the left, the Mexicans left their defenses to throw themselves into a devastating downhill charge that began to quickly push back the French. Zaragoza then decided to seal de Lorenzo's fate with a deadly cavalry charge ordered on both flanks. The French morale was absolutely shattered. The entirety of de Lorenzo's army rushed a panicked retreat off the field. Zaragoza had his victory. The Battle of Puebla was a decisive win for the Mexicans, who only suffered 227 casualties, while the French lost more than 3 times as many men. The battle was not the turning point in the French invasion, neither was it the last battle to erupt in Puebla, but it fired up the spirits of patriotic resistance across Mexico, as it proved that the young nation had a chance to oppose their invaders. Today, the battle is celebrated in the holiday Cinco De Mayo in America and Mexico. In America, cultural appropriation by unauthentic Mexican-themed attire is quite common among those who don't even know what the holiday is about. Is this a valid form of celebration? Or is it disrespectful to the men who fought and died for their country? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you to our artist Silent Rebel Art for her beautiful portraits. If you wish to see 19th century soldiers in an anime art form, please follow her Instagram account in the description below. And thank you for watching. Consider supporting me on Patreon if you wish to see the channel grow and win the chance to make suggestions for future videos.